I am a writer. That's a quote from Rip Torn's character Q, spoken at the opening of WordFest in 2000's Wonder Boys, written by Michael Chabon and set in Pittsburgh. I've been waiting a long time to do that. I'd like to thank Pauline and Hillary for this honor. Pennwriters has always been an important part of my story, and I always tell new writers they'd be hard-pressed to find a better group of people anywhere in this business. And I'd also like to thank the writers in this group for doing what you do. Some of you have read me, some of you have reviewed me, some of us have shared drinks, some of you obviously drank before reviewing me. So today I'm going to talk about a question that a lot of writers get from time to time. It's a question that comes loaded with subversion and double entendre. It's a question that isn't so much an inquiry as it is a comeuppance. It can come off as sounding well-intentioned, and if it's phrased right, you might not even know it was meant to cut you down until after the exchange has ended. But we can never really be certain, right? That question is, well, what do you make? And it always comes from a well-meaning family member, usually my mom, or somebody at work who's mad that I have more Twitter followers than they do. Sometimes the question is asked online in a very public forum, an attempt to call a writer out. Well, what do you make? It's a question that assumes an answer before you can actually provide one. It assumes you're unhappy, a weirdo. It assumes you wish you were James Patterson because obviously you have a day job. So obviously you're not James Patterson. It assumes your flaky hobby is just that. It assumes that your writing is not real work. So, what does a writer make? Before I answer that question, I have to tell you three stories, three little anecdotes that let you know where I'm coming from and why I answer this question the way that I do. In 1994, I was working as a whitewater raft guide up in Ohiopyle, which is Pennsylvania's largest state park, home to the Lower Yauk. That's the Youghiogheny, Youghiogheny, and also down the Cheat River in West Virginia. It was the best job in the world for an 18-year-old trying to figure out who he was. In the spring, the snow would melt and the Cheat would rage, absolutely rage. Rapids would be rearranged from year to year, 15-foot standing waves, waterfalls cascading down 150-foot tall cliffs. There were helicopter rescues, and in 1993, somebody even name-checked the Cheat in National Geographic. It was a group of guys on a canyon in Peru, and one of the guys had just witnessed a fatality, and he said, some rivers just scare you. There's this one in West Virginia, the Cheat. And for me, an 18-year-old, that's all I needed to kind of advance with my big plans. Then when the snow was gone and the rain slowed down, everything moved up to Ohiopyle, where the water was low, and it was 90 days of rapids, girls, and pizza in that order. When the school term started in the fall, I went back to work at the Uniontown Mall at a store called American Outfitters, not to be confused with American Eagle Outfitters, which came along later and eventually put us out of business. If you want to hear the meet cute, you have to ask, how do you about that? It involves short shorts and profanity. Back in 1994, I was at one of those proverbial forks in the road, which is to say, I had just run from a cop, and was about to have my driver's license suspended, and I was about to get academic probation. I couldn't have anticipated either of those things when Heidi came strolling into the old American Outfitters. She had just done a 6-month internship at Walt Disney World, foreshadowing, and had a semester of school left. In the spirit of full disclosure, I should also tell you that I didn't know that a driver's license suspension and subsequent academic probation would lead to me getting booted from my house on December 31st, 1994. Happy New Year. But we always had fun, and that was a fun time to be dating. Hiking, traveling, spending nights under the stars, road tripping in the mountains or to the beach, a trip to Mexico to see Maya ruins. Heidi's first degree was anthropology and archaeology. So in 1998, we got married, and we weren't really sure what we wanted to do. Neither of us wanted to be teachers when we grew up, yet there we were. Just before we got married, we both applied to the Maya archaeology program at Pitt, and we weren't really sure that more school felt like something either of us wanted to do. We were both jacked up on Jimmy Buffett, Pre-5 o'clock summer, Jimmy Buffett, there's a difference. And Heidi said we could both easily make a go of it in Florida at Walt Disney World, working for the mouse, the mouse. So we took the point. I don't know why Heidi dragged that old typewriter down to Orlando, but she did, and it sat there for a long time. It was 1998, so only Mulder and Scully had access to a PC all the time. And at some point she started writing, and it intrigued me. How does she know how to write a book? Where do the words come from? Is she going to let somebody read it? Won't she be embarrassed if people don't like it? Then some guy ran a red light and hit her so hard the cops couldn't figure out which direction she'd been coming from. It put her out of commission for a few weeks. Then, while she slept away the bruises, I started to type. I missed my mountains and the river, and I wanted to put all my whitewater rafting stories on paper. And eventually realized I needed something to hold them all together, a character. And that's when I began writing fiction. After a while, we made it back to PA, but we both kept writing by hand on picnic tables when it was nice outside, then typing our handwritten pages on that typewriter, editing as we went. We wrote up in the mountains on a blanket next to the river, on vacation. Then we both got our first round of submissions out and our first rejections back, and we both kept going, just like you're supposed to. Heidi even found us a lucrative little gig writing travel guides. That advance check was bigger than any I'd ever seen from real work. Air quotes or no? And we hustled a lot, writing for websites, still trying to generate content in this time when the internet was still in its infancy, writing for newspapers. One website even paid us in brand new gear for writing trail reviews, thousands of dollars worth of backpacks and tents and sleeping bags and clothing and roof racks. We hooked up more than a few of our friends with complete sets of Yakima roof racks. We had so many opportunities we couldn't possibly write them all, but we did, even though it meant making sacrifices, because no matter how hard you write, there are still only so many hours in a day. And then we got the call. The one call that changed everything. Our agent literally said, "I've never had to do this." That's not a good sign. A year's worth of big contracts for big books with big publishers dried up. One of the houses cut the line that we'd be writing for, and another house the editor left, taking all her projects with her. That phone call stung. But we kept on writing. We weren't doing it for the money. In 2005, Heidi got accepted into the Writing Popular Fiction program at Seton Hill University, and I vowed, I promised, I swore that I would never go back to school. I didn't need a degree to write. 6 months later, I was sitting through orientation in the library and outlining my second novel. It's a good thing, or otherwise I wouldn't have met Timmons, my first true mentor, and this speech would have ended right here. The community bolstered us in ways we've never experienced, and Heidi and I started hitting conferences and conventions, spending more time with writers than non-writers. By 2008, most of our best friends were writers, and that's a great /scary /fortunate /challenging situation to be in. When your circle consists of bestsellers and award winners, you work your ass off trying to keep up, and it keeps you hungry. It's exhausting, but it keeps you hungry. Self-publishing wasn't an option then. Not if you wanted to maintain your dignity, anyway. Even though J.A. Conrad, who had just been dropped by his publisher, was making thousands of dollars a month with his self-published books, a new writer couldn't even consider self-publishing. Vanity press, right? Gatekeepers and all that. So it was with a massive sigh of relief and a huge weight off my shoulders that I went into the summer of 2010 with what I thought was a pretty good situation. Mere inches from the validation I needed to get to the next level. It was at Pennwriters, and I pitched my Seton Hill thesis. My dad had a mini stroke the day before the conference, and I almost didn't go. But when I found out he'd been released from the hospital, we got up early that Saturday morning and made the drive to Lancaster. And I pitched, and this agent said, "Send me the whole thing. The next time you hear from me, it will be with edits." This wasn't my first rodeo, but it was the first time I ever heard this in the room. I took it as a positive sign. The next time you hear from me, it will be with edits. of some mythical nebulous market hanging over my head. I was free to write whatever I wanted, and it was fun. Then I realized I needed a better cover for my self-published, self-formatted novel. I started looking at old concert posters for rock bands and musical acts, which led me to the old school print shops, which led me to Hat Showprint in Nashville, Tennessee. Hat Showprint had been around for 138 years, a literal country music institution and now an official part of the Country Music Hall of Fame. And Heidi and I went to Nashville and we got invited back into the print shop by Jim Sheridan, who literally wrote the book on letterpress. We met Chairman Meow, the shop cat. And the walls were covered with all the posters that Hatch had done for my heroes. The White Stripes, Wilco, Willie Nelson, and a bunch of other artists whose names don't start with W. Elvis Presley, Elvis Costello, Dolly Parton, Dave Matthews Band, Johnny and June, Loretta Lynn, Led Zeppelin. Robert Plant was literally in the shop the week before we got there. He was on stage at the Ryman, and they invited him back to sign the press.
Rock and roll.
And you know what? That was a lot of fun. That fall, Heidi was invited to participate in Frostburg State University's Indie Lit Fest because of her role as a co-editor of many genres in one craft, the unofficial Seton Hill Writing Popular Fiction textbook, which of course is available at fine booksellers everywhere. and here as well. And I was able to get on a few panels about self-publishing. So I went up with my box of books and participated on panels, and at some point Mike Arnton, who is truly one of the best people I know, introduced us to Jennifer and John from Raw Dog Screaming Press. We ended up going to dinner together, which took hours, and you know what? It was a lot of fun. A week later, I sent them one of my self-published, self-formatted, self-produced novels with a note that said how much I loved hanging out with them and how much I'd love to work on something with them in the future. I don't know what it was, but it didn't feel like a pitch. By the end of the month, I was signing a 5-book contract. Self-publishing let me feel like I was bringing more than just my book to the table. And I continued doing some of the things with RDSP that I did while self-publishing, formatting my ebooks, working with Hat Showprint for my next cover. It was a collaboration and my best experience ever working with a publisher. We'd have clandestine meetings at the halfway point between their place and ours and plot world domination. And you know what? It was fun. We'd drive down to Baltimore for the day because we knew they'd have a table at the book fest. We hung out a lot and got really close to them. I didn't know that a relationship with a publisher could feel like that. For the cover of All Saints, I wasn't having much luck. My editor, Jennifer, is also a graphic designer and is a tough critic. I had that crossed out and I put honest in there. And that's why I didn't tell her that the cover for All Saints was my design, my artwork, until after she said she loved it. And in fact, we sat at their beach house last weekend and watched them receive their specialty press award at the Horror Writers Association SogarCon in Grand Rapids via live stream. It was fun. It was a great time. And then my story changed. I went from self-published author to self-published turned published author. Pop Matters even mentioned that in their review of Hellbender, my Seton Hill thesis and debut with RDSP. The reviewer said, "Perhaps I'm making too much of this, but Hellbender may not be just another good book. I wonder if this book and its author represents a changing tide, a new trend in the way books, good books, move from writer to reader." His attitudes toward the publishing process and his willingness to state, rather loudly, that no matter how you are published or who publishes you, you are an independent writer, seemed to make him just as original as the book itself. Hellbender is available at fine booksellers everywhere. And it's here as well. After that article came out, I started getting emails about film and movie rights, and it was fun. I teach Earth and Space Science and Advanced Earth and Space Science at Uniontown High School, which is in Uniontown, PA, in case you were wondering. I just finished my 20th year there. Everybody assumes I teach English, but I'm a bit of a polymath, if I do say so myself. I was never able to settle on just a science or just an art. Being a teacher also explains why I have children. I live in the same town I grew up in, 20 minutes from Ohio, a half mile from the school where I teach, so I can go home every day for lunch. We still write a lot. During the summer, we can sit on the front porch with our laptops and a bottle of wine, and the neighbors all know that we're working. But that doesn't stop a lot of them from coming up to the porch to have a quick chat. They all want to feel a part of the magic we're making. Who wouldn't? We travel when we can. I'm very lucky to have the time off that I do, and I'm fortunate to be married to someone who shares my passions. I know we have a 1 in a million thing. It's better to be lucky than good, right? We always joke that we're the twofer. We share a signing slot, share a table, share an article, and we used to resent that. I think it's just taken us this much time to realize how lucky we are. We've been hiking a lot over the last few years. In June, we're going to California. We hope to climb Alta Peak in Sequoia, and then right after that, we're going to Yosemite. And we've been doing these training hikes up Ohio Powell for a while now. We do 4 miles round trip with an 850-foot elevation gain. So far this year, we've done 11,500 feet. We've been doing it twice a week, rain or snow, went up to our knees. We get to the top, eat our gummy bears, snap a picture, and then head back down. We used to hike when we didn't have money to do anything else. We had this old Jeep that we got in Florida after the accident. We ended up putting 256,000 miles on it. But as long as we had gas in the tank, we were free. Well, gas in the tank and money for Taco Bell, and we were free. And now we hike and we talk about plots and characters and book ideas and marketing ideas. We've plotted an entire series on those hikes, and I don't know if we'll ever have time to write them all. Back then, we talked about how great life would be once we got those big book deals. We talked about all the places we wanted to go, all the things that we wanted to do. Lunch on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean and Cinque Terre, visiting the Viking settlement at Los Meadows in Newfoundland, finding books signed by our favorite authors in London. At some point, we realized we couldn't wait for the big book deals to start doing those things. At some point, we realized the clock was ticking. A poor man says, I can't afford it. A wealthy man says, how can I afford it? At some point, one of us said to the other, we can't wait for some imaginary point down the road to start living our lives. We can't turn the hourglass on its side. We've got to start living now. And we found a way to make it work. We knew we had to be living the lives we wanted to live before the millions started rolling in from all those book contracts. We knew that writing wouldn't fix the things in our lives that we were unhappy with. And we started to take personal inventory of the things we had. We realized we had almost everything we needed to live the lives we wanted to live. Time together, time to write, time to just time. We knew that when all was said and done, we weren't really ready for the money anyway. And that is why I talk about the things I talk about in response to the question, well, what do writers make? With apologies to Taylor Molly. Writers make wizards fight dragons. Then we make dragons fight zombies. Then we make dragon zombies fight robots. Writers make the geek get the girl and then make them live happily ever after. Writers make readers stay up way past their bedtime and think about their book long after they've closed the cover. Writers make universes appear with just a few keystrokes. Then with just a few more, we wipe them out. People who don't write think only gods can do that. Writers make people ask big, life-changing questions, the kind of questions that shatter worldviews, the kinds of questions that can truly set a person free. Writers make Paris feel real to somebody who can't make the trip. We let it breathe, ripe with the scent of cherry blossoms and fresh-baked madeleines, carry a reader along the Boulevard Saint-Germain toward Place Saint-Michel with its statue of St. Michael the Archangel, to the Bucanista in the shadow of Notre Dame that sells the Django Reinhardt records. Writers make better friends. Who else can talk about poisonous plants, Victorian textiles, pulp revolving rifles, and whatever else we had to research for our last books so casually in the same conversation? Writers make time travel possible. Take that, scientists. And Tony Stark. Writers make people feel what it's like to be somebody else, what it's like to see through the eyes of another. We make empathy where none before existed, making the world just a little better than it was. I believe this, or I wouldn't have said it. Writers make the lonely think they're part of something much bigger. We make the small feel big. The voices believe they've been heard. Writers make people smarter. Writers make decisions in their own lives that repercuss in the lives of others. Only a writer could have said, our battered suitcases were piled on the sidewalk, and again, we had longer ways to go, but no matter, the road is life. Jack Kerouac. Writers make better partners. Who better to help us plot the story of the rest of our lives? Writers make the abstract real. We manifest ideas like viruses that can infect readers with hope and imagination. Writers make light in a world that can sometimes seem a little dark. Writers make magic in a world where magic doesn't really exist. Writers make the power that fuels humanity. And that is how I answered the question, well, what does a writer make? Thank you.